The Kliq is a word that immediately makes many wrestlers nervous. It's not just a group in which we found some of the biggest names in the business.
That was it. That was the foundation of the five of us, and that was the group.
According to many tales that we must of course take for what they are, they were the most powerful and toxic clan in the WWE in the 90s. They could fire whoever they wanted, do drugs, steal other people's girlfriends. It's a pleasure to meet you on the Wrestling Paradise to tell you the biggest controversies about pro wrestling's most hated gang for several years. Of course, nothing must be considered as an absolute truth. These 5 individuals have also impacted sports entertainment in a very positive way, and they have all changed a lot since then. Let's not forget it.
Can you feel it? You
yeah,
feel me?
I can feel it.
Are you ready to be shocked to learn how the Kliq almost caused a wrestler's suicide? Do you want to know more about the amazing idea they had so they wouldn't get arrested by the police? Do you want to find out which colleagues they ruined the career of? And are you curious to learn how they were involved in one of pro wrestling's most famous scandals? You are at the right place, because in our video we will discover together the dark side of this infamous faction, and it will shock you. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, the biggest controversies about the Kliq. Let's go. Nowadays, Sunny's name is infamous in the pro wrestling world. While she was the diva that many men were in love with in the 90s, she experienced a monumental downfall that led her to jail. Who could have believed, seeing her at that time, that she would end up killing a man by having drunk too much, that she would become an addict who would even star in adult movies? In any case, the Kliq had an important role in her fate. It all started the day she came to the WWE with Chris Candido, a wrestler who had been her boyfriend for several years. He was apparently very much in love with her. But the diva quickly caught the attention of the alpha males in the locker room, if we can call them that. While still in a relationship with Candido, Shawn Michaels was hitting on her and achieving his goal.
Can you feel it? You want to feel me?
I can feel it.
All right. With a big R. You know, I'm feeling awfully randy. You know what?
Sunny was going to cheat on Chris multiple times with the Heartbreak Kid. Apparently, the Kliq even hired some colleagues to watch Candido while Mr. WrestleMania was doing what he had to do with the blonde. While she seemed to be a fairly innocent girl at the beginning of her career, Sunny became the Kliq Girl, which was her nickname now since she was with them all the time. This story went so far that Chris, head over heels in love with Sunny, was very depressed because of this situation, and people even found what looked like a suicide note in his stuff. According to former wrestler Bam Bam Bigelow, the members of the Kliq were amused by this situation. They were laughing, wondering if they would manage to push Candido to kill himself. Bigelow even thought that Chris would end up committing suicide or killing one of the members. Learning all this, it's hard to have sympathy for them, although it is also said that Chris was very naive and swallowed all the lies of a vicious and manipulative Sunny.
Here we are. I told you I'd get the exclusive. I'm right here with the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels.
In the Kliq, you have to know that Triple H was the one who didn't drink and who didn't do drugs. So in their trips from city to city, he was the one who drove. In an interview, Vince McMahon has already stated that the members of this sulfurous group considered the game as their spokesman, the voice of reason. They saw him as the one who would pick them up, sometimes literally, dress them up and take them to the next town. In the car, they were talking business all along the trip. They protected and helped each other. If one of them had drunk a little too much, or had done a little too much drugs, he could be sure that one of his colleagues would throw him in a cold shower the next morning. They even developed their own sign, the famous gesture of the horns. With them, the colleagues quickly understood that they would do things their way and not otherwise. Do you realize that we are talking about a group that was almost hated by everyone behind the scenes? They were the focus of the WWE product for a part of the 90s. So they were the ones who sometimes decided who got to keep their job, who got to get fired. According to Bam Bam Bigelow, this group was outright telling Vince McMahon what to do. Their control was so important according to him that they decided to make a wrestler their victim. Then this one, then another. When they had managed to get someone to leave or cause their dismissal, they would move on to the next one without worrying about the lives they were breaking. According to Jim Cornette, for example, we had an illustration when Shawn Michaels had a rivalry with the Big Vader in 1996. When Vader had the misfortune of being a little too brutal with him in the ring, HBK told him that he would get him fired if he did that again. Cornette also describes this member of the Kliq as someone who was unprofessional in those years, always addicted to painkillers, forcing everyone to give in to his whims.
That was it. That was the foundation of the five of us, and that was the group.
A locker room poison. These are the words that the legend Bret Hart said to describe the Kliq. He was also not really a fan of this group, like the vast majority of his colleagues in reality. In Bret's eyes, Kevin Nash was rather a good guy who could not be proud to be associated with these people. But Scott Hall was the worst in his eyes. The Canadian claims that you just had to look at him in the 90s to understand that he was a train wreck in his life. He describes him as someone always dissatisfied, whose very negative energy rubbed off on those who were close to him. By being with him often, people ended up feeling unhappy and wanting to go towards self-destruction. According to Hart, his bad mood and unhappiness were rotting other wrestlers. As for the wrestler Shane Douglas, he also told that all WWE wrestlers were afraid of the Kliq at the time. It was not a fear based on the men per se, but rather the power they had. Can you only imagine having to be liked by such individuals not to get fired? Apparently, even the biggest names in the company in those years saw this clan as a threat that could make them earn less money. For Bret Hart, the Kliq controlled which rivalries were set up between which wrestlers, who was entitled to a push and who wasn't. Even today, he sees them as a bunch of backstabbers and liars.
The Kliq proved their worth over the next several years as they headlined WrestleManias.
Many other wrestlers whose career in the Federation would have been negatively impacted by the Kliq in the early 90s. This would be the case of the wrestler Carl Ouellet. Before being known as PCO, he had been renamed Jean-Pierre Lafitte and played a pirate character in the Stamford Company. To say the least, he had a hell of an identity.
Well, I know a lot about him, and as a matter of fact, if we have time, I'll give all these morons out here a little history lesson.
But everything changed for him when he had to face Diesel Kevin Nash. While he was a promising talent, he bumped into the influence of the Kliq. Hang in there. When he was supposed to face him, Shawn Michaels used his power behind the scenes to make Nash beat Lafitte clean. You can imagine it, the pirate would come out of it weakened and discredited. But Jean-Pierre refused, and the match ended with a double countout. At that moment, the Kliq picked him up and made sure that the push he was having was completely cancelled. Shawn Michaels himself confessed that they made sure to bury him, but not secretly, however, in front of him. They called Vince McMahon and said the pirate needed to go. Shortly after, Lafitte's WWE story was over. Wrestler Brian Clark is another person who will not go on vacation with the Kliq. In an interview he did in 2008, he revealed everything he saw behind the scenes of the WWE with each of its members, and you will see that it is quite radical. Already, he told that he was often the victim of their jokes, even if it was common in the pro wrestling industry in the 90s. They threw his shoes in the water, locked his bag up and other things like that. According to him, Sean Waltman started in the Kliq by kissing the butts of its members and carrying their bags. One evening, probably in an attempt to make himself accepted by others, Waltman locked Clark's bag up precisely, but Brian wasn't in the mood for that. He was ready to fight with the Kliq guys. Beyond these bullying stories of all kinds, he said about the Heartbreak Kid that if all the cruiserweights in the world who admire him knew the real Shawn Michaels, they would quickly change their minds. He describes him as a bad person. According to him, Vince McMahon and Pat Patterson probably liked to watch HBK in the shower and see him pose for Playgirl.
This is such good shit!
The interesting thing about the Kliq is that their stories are sometimes just as entertaining as pro wrestling storylines. In 1995, you must have in mind that Triple H was in the infancy of his WWE career. He was not yet a really well-established member of the Kliq, despite Scott Hall, who was trying at all costs to somehow recruit him. In any case, we can say that at that time, the future cerebral assassin was mixed up in one of the most sulfurous stories of this group.
Every now and then. And that takes some guts, and there were probably more times, Vince and I obviously got along.
One night, Shawn Michaels, Scott Hall and Sean Waltman had consumed a lot of sommers and beer, while Kevin Nash was pretty much sober. Triple H, faithful to his role as a driver, drove them to their favorite restaurant. But at that moment, can you only guess what they saw when they arrived there? A whole group of policemen. Thanks to the people they knew at this restaurant, they were still able to enter. But it was better not to catch the attention of the police officers given their condition. That was without counting on Hall and Waltman. As soon as they entered the place, Scott started yelling at the police while Shawn was handing out beer bottles to passers-by. They were able to eat there despite everything. But right after that, they were going too far. When they had finished their meal, Scott tripped over a potted plant while Michaels was having seizures because of the pills he had taken. At that moment, the police officers decided to put handcuffs on them all. Clever as he is, Kevin Nash managed to make the authorities believe that the Heartbreak Kid was epileptic. In the end, they will end up in an ambulance instead of a police vehicle. When they were with a doctor, they laughed in his face, telling him that he was not epileptic at all, but that he had just taken Somos. After all this adventure, Triple H asked Kevin Nash if these kind of nights were normal. He will have the answer all the following years. The Kliq has also been involved in one of the most famous scandals in pro wrestling. You may have even heard of it before. We are, of course, talking about the curtain call. This incident took place at Madison Square Garden in May 1996. One night, Shawn Michaels had a cage match against Kevin Nash. But it was not a night like any other, as you will see. After the match, Triple H and Scott Hall joined them. They hugged each other. You should know that Nash and Hall were about to leave for the WCW competitor and all their money. So this evening was like a goodbye for them. But there was a big problem. It was a time when the spectators still believed a lot in what is called kayfabe, this illusion that we create in pro wrestling. To put it simply, the fans believed that everything they saw on the screen was real. And the four men were not supposed to be friends in this illusion. On the contrary, it was a period when Triple H was supposed to be in a rivalry with Scott Hall, and the same for Michaels and Nash, who wrestled under the name Diesel back then. We will say that the spectators weren't well aware yet that everything was scripted and staged. But when they hugged at the end of that match, they were breaking all that. This act, in which the Kliq was therefore fully involved, harmed the wrestling business. Even today, some personalities like Jim Cornette resent them for exposing the secrets of wrestling in the open. In addition, we must realize that Vince McMahon was very keen that kayfabe was always preserved because he thought it was good for the storylines. Of course, believing that wrestlers hate each other for real helps to invest thoroughly in a story. In the end, a large number of people discovered the magician's tricks. We can consider that this event with the Kliq was the first big incident ever in which kayfabe was totally broken. In the end, Triple H will be the only one to be punished for this situation by having his push suspended. Hall and Nash were leaving for WCW, while Shawn Michaels remained unpunished given his star status. And this was it for the most shocking controversies about the Kliq. It's undeniable that these stories don't do much favors for Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Sean Waltman and Triple H. But it's still very important to remember that this is only based on what other wrestlers said. Some people can lie to get media talking about them, exaggerate stories, express jealousy for someone by damaging his reputation, be bitter for not having been a big name in wrestling. We must not fall into the demonization of these people, who have all evolved in the meantime, acknowledged their mistakes, changed. Let's not forget either they are talented wrestlers. They don't owe their success only to politics, far from it. I have a debate for you. In your eyes, which member of the Kliq has had the best career? Come and tell us your opinion. It will be interesting to exchange our points of view in the comments. We can say that the Kliq has made an impact on pro wrestling. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay on the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?